Martin Bryant had set his alarm for 6 a.m. on the 28th of April, 1996. He didn't normally get up that early, but today was a day he'd been planning for months. 2 weeks ago, he even went to the department store to buy a sports bag, measuring it to be sure it would fit the weapons he intended to use. This was important to him. That day, he showered with Petra, his girlfriend at the time. They ate breakfast, and at 8 a.m. she left, having no idea the horror her boyfriend would bring. He would spend his next hour drinking sambuca while gathering his weapons, 2 semi-auto rifles, a shotgun, as well as plenty of ammunition. At 9:47, he set his house's security alarm. He loaded his big bag of guns into his yellow Volvo, along with a surfboard he brought. Then he headed down to Port Arthur. He stopped along the way 4 times, once to get a lighter, another time to get a coffee in Fawcett, and then gas at Tirana. Finally, he bought some tomato sauce. As the maps he drew in crayon would later illustrate, his first victims that day were Sally and David Martin. Bryant confronted them one last time about a property he had wanted to buy from them. Describing the event, he said, "I tried to buy the farm off them before and offered them a lot of money, but Mrs. Martin would say to me, 'I'm never going to sell it. It doesn't matter how much money you offer me.' So I shot him in the head." He left their bodies lying on their bed. His next target was the Broad Arrow Cafe. He sat down and shot 2 people with his Colt AR-15 semi-auto rifle. In 15 seconds, he killed 12 people and injured 10 more. The last person he killed almost escaped his view. However, while Bryant was on his way out, he noticed the man and killed him. Bryant's destruction wouldn't end there, though. He spiraled out into the parking lot and started killing people inside and around nearby buses. Martin was driving away from the crime scene when he spotted a woman named Nanette Mikak and her 2 children, Alana and Madeline. They were ignorant of his murderous intent until it was too late. They approached his car, only to have him turn his weapons on them. Just before her death, Nanette pleaded for her children's lives. As if to spite her, he killed them soon after, chasing one of them around a tree before ending her life. Moving outward, he stopped at a toll booth, killing 4 more people, stealing their BMW, and leaving his Volvo and surfboard behind. He then drove to a service station, killed a woman, and kidnapped her boyfriend, Glenn Pears, forcing him into the trunk of the car. At first, this kidnapping was the only crime he would confess to. He then drove to the Seascape guest house with his hostage and laid siege to the police, killing Glenn sometime during the siege, taking his 35th life that day. Unlike many a killer, Bryant was raised well, and by all accounts, a dumb, irritable child, but not an overtly disturbed one. When he was 12, he made the local news for catching himself on fire with fireworks. Growing up, he also hunted rabbits and attempted to sell them to locals. Perhaps because he looked so attractive, smart, and put together, people would expect intellectual abilities and social skills that he simply lacked. He was never placed in the school he really should have been, and he was constantly frustrated as a result. Even though all he wanted was to be liked by his peers, he constantly got in fights with them. His dim, irritable nature made it very difficult to work with him. He was a loner who dropped out at 16, blaming everyone else for not liking him. He concluded that people were just mean and malevolent. He never got a driver's license, as he didn't think he would be able to pass. After dropping out of school, he did manage to befriend one person. Her name was Helen Harvey, and she was the heir to the Tattersfield lottery fortune. She had him take care of her many cats and dogs. One day she got in a car accident with him in the passenger seat. Bryant got out with a serious neck injury, but she died as a result. His father, the only man he could talk to, committed suicide shortly after. She left him 2 properties and over $500,000. Bryant thought that this money would come with a social life, friends, and girlfriends. But in reality, it only got him people willing to put up with him for a time and use him to get as much as they could. In 1995, he had a girlfriend for 8 months. He would try to impress her by pretending to read impressive books, a gesture she played along with to make him feel better. One time, he took her out for a boat ride, and they ran out of gas in the middle of the trip. He cried, blaming himself for involving her and fearing for his life. At the time, he was 27, and she was just 16. But he was still serious enough about the relationship to propose to her. She turned him down, in part due to his intelligence, or lack thereof. When the police captured Bryant in the guest house, he had insisted he wasn't guilty, that he wasn't even in Port Arthur that day, and that he went surfing instead. He used the items he bought and his surfboard to try and peddle a badly written story of that day. When the investigators called him out on this lie, he erupted into laughter and confessed to everything, giving a detailed account of what happened, and even drew crayon maps of where he and his victims were, handing them over, almost bragging about what he had done. Even still, he insisted on pleading not guilty, even though his lawyer was desperately trying to convince him to plead guilty. With such overwhelming evidence against him, the lawyer wanted to spare the remaining victims from testifying. Finally, Bryant agreed to plead guilty to the murders, but not to the attempted murders, in a bid to force his victims to see him one last time and declare him the killer. He wanted the attention, and the fact that the media was portraying him as a demon delighted him to no end. Finally, his lawyer got a breakthrough in the negotiations when they tested his IQ. They found it was in the bottom 98th percentile. But more importantly, they discovered that he was really sensitive and didn't like hearing how low his intelligence actually was. This inspired the lawyer to tell him that going through with such an obvious ploy, everyone would call him an idiot, and he would then be referred to as Simple Martin. The next day, Martin Bryant changed his plea to guilty to all charges and wrote a signed confession. He was sentenced to 35 life sentences and 1,652 years in prison without parole. Martin was excited as he thought he would finally be popular in prison. Much to his disappointment, he ended up just as much of an outcast living in Risdon prison as he was out of prison, ultimately failing the one thing he always wanted to achieve. He has gained a severe amount of weight and needs constant supervision to ensure he is safe from the other prisoners, and even himself. He has attempted suicide many times, and his only visitor is his mother, a woman who, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, insists to this day that her son is innocent. As of April 20th, 2022, it will have been 26 years since this one simple man scarred and changed Australia forever. His crimes so horrendous as to inspire far stricter restrictions on gun ownership. Bryant's lawyer, John Avery, pitied him and couldn't help but consider Bryant a friend. And while Avery doesn't blame anyone but himself for the path he went on next, this would send him on a journey of self-destruction, embezzling $500,000 from his own firm to buy expensive art. This cost him his career, 4 years in jail, and wrecked his marriage. As of last year, he was still hoping to put all of this behind him. Avery couldn't reconcile the horrible acts that Bryant committed, especially with how he felt about him as a person. And albeit far from hating this man, Avery was to some extent the final victim of Bryant's tirade.